Welcome back to Newsday. Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, a few days from now, a planned mass action to protest against economic hardship perceivably caused by misgovernance by those currently wielding power in Nigeria will kick in. Already trending across social media is the hashtag #EndBadGovernance in Nigeria. The proposed peaceful nationwide demonstrations are scheduled to last for 10 days, with the stated objective of shining the light on impunity among Nigeria's political elite, spiraling official corruption, economic mismanagement, and insecurity bedeviling the land. Similar protests have for weeks shaken the foundations of Kenya and Uganda to a reasonable extent. What is the spirit behind this popular awakening on the continent? We're now being joined by African Affairs Analyst, author and good governance advocate Achike Chude. Good afternoon. Many thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. All right, Achike, can you hear me?
I can very well.
Fantastic. All right, so let's get on with it.
You.
Oh, awesome. It's great to have you. Let's get straight into it. Of course, we know that the protest in Uganda didn't kick in, so I just want to correct that from the onset. However, I watched a very interesting interview with former President Olusegun Obasanjo that he granted while he was recently in Kenya. And he was asked a question because apparently in the past he had said that after the Arab Spring, there would be the African winter. What are your thoughts on this analogy? Do you think we're currently experiencing what one might call the African winter?
I'm not sure because the situation is still unfolding. Kenya is the place everybody is focused on what is happening there. But we also have some bit of restiveness in some other parts of the continent. And so it is not exactly a throwback to, what happened, that started from Tunisia and then spread to other parts of the continent, even the Middle East, parts of the Middle East. I think this is just essentially, of course, it's the basis of this again is the hunger in the land, the lack of opportunities and the, lack of inclusiveness, in social, accessing social amenities and social programs across the continent of Africa. All of this, again, stemming from what one would describe as a misgovernance that has gone on for so long. And that has brought about a situation where in a continent that is blessed with so much, with an embarrassment of riches, mineral resources, natural resources, and then, of course, perhaps the most important of all resources, human resources. The continent continues to wallow in poverty. And so it's only a matter of time before people will begin to protest and agitate. And then by the time you look at, the influence of social media, where events that happen in one place, are transmitted live to other parts of the world, other parts of the continent, the possibility of others who find themselves in the same deep economic morass, the possibility of them also being influenced by such trends, by such happenings, is always exceedingly very, very high. And so whether it is going to, just as we had the Arab Spring, whether what happened in Kenya would happen or be replicated in other parts of the continent is something we don't know. All of these countries have their own contexts, crisis-specific contexts, and different peculiarities. But whether they will be influenced by what is happening in other countries, again, is a different thing. We know that hunger speaks only one language. Suffering and frustration also speak, one language. And so we will see how it unfolds. But again, a lot is dependent on political leadership, across the continent in those places that have been unaffected by this series of protests and strife, to be able to see what they can do, to stave off this protest, because they have a way of escalating if care is not taken. But beyond that, again, is the fact that the best way, I think, not to confront this is through acts of repression and violence, being visited by the state on protesters. They must look for a way to engage, because if it gets to that level of where we must repress them no matter what it takes. It depends on what the threshold for the people are. It gets to a level where people say, well, regardless of what you do to me, I cannot fall further than I have fallen, and I have nothing to lose. So we hope it doesn't get to that extent. We hope that the government will be able to do something to respond, to the deep economic and social malaise that is going on, in our country and in other parts of the continent of Africa. Africa truly needs to wake up. Africa really needs to take its position in global affairs. We cannot continue to wallow in the kind of mediocrity we have found ourselves in, especially since independence of the various African countries.
Noted, Mr. Chude. Now, when it comes to this proposed protest that's slated for August the 1st, we've seen a lot of backlash or warnings or appeals even. Some bodies distancing themselves from those who are planning to carry out the protest, the president appealing and whatnot. Is there not, from what we've seen so far, do you think that there's a lot of anticipation that things might go sour as opposed to letting things happen naturally, and perhaps it will not be the way that it's anticipated, things might not play out the way that it's been anticipated, that it might actually be peaceful, logical, and effective? Do you think that there should be room given for it to play out as opposed to upfront repression of what hasn't even taken place yet?
Well, I think for the government, they'll be looking at it as whatever decision they take as that between the devil and the deep blue sea. There are only two things that can happen. Either you let the protest go on, of course, which is a legitimate right of the Nigerian people or of any people in a democracy to express themselves, to express their unhappiness and their grievance. We must not forget that it's a fundamental right that is being expressed. When people are hungry and they say that they are hungry and, and they protest the cause of the hunger, it is a right. But at the same time, in the expression of that right, you want to hope that, that they operate, that whatever they do it within the parameters, within the ambits of the rule of law. And I'm not sure that anybody that is thinking of engaging in protest has a mind that is focused on destruction and mayhem and anarchy. I do not believe so. I think they just want the government to know, regardless of the best efforts of the government, that these efforts have not actually changed the situation, and so they want to bring their complaints forcefully into the public space. So from that perspective, yes, they have a right to do whatever they want to do. Then the government again, so if the government is torn between do we do something, do we engage them, either at the level of dialogue or try to bring out the instruments of coercion. That has the possibility of exacerbating the situation and getting the protesters to dig in. So these are just the two issues. The two scenarios that I am looking at. I think that the issue of engagement is important. But who are they going to engage? How are they going to engage? How widespread will this engagement with the people be? But again, are we not putting the cart before the horse? We have not seen, I think there is just a lot of speculation and a lot of worry and a lot of anticipation and expectation, depending on the side that that you are standing on. It has not started, so we don't know what course it is going to take. Nothing stops the state. Again, it's also the right of the state to be on the watch out, to be on the lookout, to ensure that there is no threat to life and property. So that is what they are expected to do. And so, again, it could go. Look, we're already thinking the worst about the protest. The protest might not even has anybody actually thought about the fact that the protest might not even, begin as and when they are saying is going to start. You know, sometimes these things have a way of just starting on their own and then increasing in intensity. So the fact that they are saying there's going to be a protest, this is going to happen, is not exactly guaranteed that it will happen the way the protesters have said, or whoever is behind it has said it is going to happen, it's going to devolve. We don't know for sure exactly.
Right, and of course, we don't know because this movement is faceless, nameless, leaderless, very similar to what we saw in Kenya. Now, my question to you is, when we look at the trend, even when we saw End SARS that took place here in Nigeria a few years ago, the trend is moving towards this because we've seen what transpires in the past when there are publicly known people declared to be the leaders of these movements. My question to you, though, is that I'll use Kenya as a case study because in Kenya, the protests were at some point attributed to opposition under Raila Odinga. Now, once the talks of a government of national unity came to the front, they quickly realized that the Gen Zs are not behind Raila Odinga. And in fact, he's not the opposition leader who is behind these mass protests. So my question to you is, why do you feel African leaders are still unable to accept the fact that the youth can galvanize themselves as a group in the absence of any known or recognized politician? Don't you think that's possibly a source of some of the challenges we're having with engagement?
Well, I think it is essentially because they have done this thing for far too long and they have succeeded and nobody has actually ever brought them to account. You know, and so, you know, when a crime goes on for so long, or a particular action goes on for so long without any form of challenge, there is a tendency that you grow in confidence and then perfidy. And so the word impunity describes such a situation where people believe that they can do something and get away with it. And it is not just that they believe, they have seen it happen several times in the past. You know, and so you are talking about the African continent, and this has been the running theme in terms of governance across most of Africa. And that's why, in spite of our, you know, being blessed with all manners of resources, both natural and human, our politicians have continued to act as if, you know, they have learned nothing and they have forgotten nothing. And that is actually what has happened. They have truly learned nothing and they have forgotten nothing, and that's why they continue, you know, on the same trajectory. And you know, all things eventually come to an end, and the only thing that is permanent, said Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, is change, and that is the only thing that is permanent. You know, and so we cannot remain in this state for too long. Do not forget that we've had African leaders that were in government for you know, 20, 30 years, 35 years, 45 years. You know some of them already. Some, those who were lucky to pass on while they were in power. I mean, they were lucky. A lot of them were not so lucky. Look at what happened in Sudan. Look at what happened in Egypt and so on. So there's a lesson for a lot for them to learn. And I want to believe, for instance, you're talking about, and we're talking about, for instance, the culture among an entire political class. For instance, yes, members of National Assembly, having realized what is going on in the country, have said that they are going to give off, you know, do away with a certain percentage of their salaries. But again, people are looking and saying, no, but that's not where the issue is. The issue is in the allowances, in the billions of naira that is being collected, you know, by you people. So if they want to assuage the Nigerian people, now let me tell you, they should not do what Ruto of Kenya did under duress, because he now had no choice because the people were on the street and the people had refused to be assuaged. Our political class elites can actually do that, to preempt it, and that is to begin to look at their salaries and begin to make wide-ranging changes to the cost of governance that the people will see, you know, that will be visible to the people, that will be known to the people. You know, those who are collecting, and I have always said, look, that the allowances of our government, elected government officials should be cut down by as much as 60 to 70%. All of these monies they are getting. You're talking about security votes that go to governors. You know, you don't have to abrogate that, but you can cut it down by as much as 40, 50%. When you begin to move in that direction, then even the people who have been apprehensive about even the protests itself, we begin to tell, for those who know the protesters, we begin to tell them that we are beginning to see something drastic being done. You don't want to get to a level where, Ruto is forced to fire the ministers, and he's forced to, cut the salaries of civil servants. Elected civil servants. Elected, political office holders, and all of that under duress. We can avoid that situation, and so that people, can see that it is not just done, but it is seen to be done. I think that that is one way that the government can engage. This is one major way that the government can engage.
Very well said, Mr. Chude, and I like how you're doing a lot of comparison between Nigeria and Uganda.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, we're going to go on a quick break. Welcome back to Newsday. Thank you so much for staying with us. We still have with us African affairs analyst, author, and good governance advocate Achike Chude, joining us from our Abuja studio, talking about what's happening in Kenya, Nigeria, and Uganda regarding protests for better governance. Thank you so much for your patience. Now, as we begin to round up with you, of course, you were drawing examples or doing some comparison between what we've seen in Kenya and what might likely happen in Nigeria in a few days. I'm just wondering how you think the ethnic and regional diversity in Nigeria might complicate the dynamics of nationwide protests compared to the situation in Kenya if things do play out as scheduled.
Yeah, well, we have always, looked at, it's part of our diversity, the fact that you have various peoples from different parts of the country with various different, experiences, cultural history, religious history, and all that. And it has always been the fault line. It is not a disadvantage. It shouldn't naturally be, a problem that one is from represents a particular ethnic group or has certain religious beliefs and all that. These are not or should not be a problem under normal circumstances. We have nations, we have countries, all over the world with different, with citizens that come from different backgrounds, religion-wise, and also ethnic-wise, and they have been able to accommodate themselves. They have been able to, properly integrate. And so, but what has happened is that in Nigeria, it would seem, and parts of Africa, that these fault lines, if I use that expression, have always been exploited by members of the political class. But I think that it is time to wake up, because if we are talking about, an African renaissance, then some of these parochial, issues, some of these parochial politics that have always been played by the class to divide the people, should the political class should, grow above these things and begin to look at their nation states from a nationalistic, perspective. And so, yes, it does play a role. It has played a role in so many things in Nigeria, because you have people who are promoting it for their own selfish advancement and not for the interests of the people, And so, but again, you must also not forget the overwhelming influence of hunger, and poverty, because it gets to a point where a man, a hungry person who is watching his children die of starvation, will not be motivated by any of these parochial interests, ethnicity, or religion or geopolitics. All he wants to do is to ensure that his family survives. And so there's always that tendency, when it gets to a particular level and then the elites want to use that as a weapon, the way they have always done, and they are not going to get the kind of response that they have always gotten from the people, because this time around, hunger is biting everybody and biting far and wide. And so they need to begin to look at ways, to bring the people together. And that means that they must also, focus on giving the people good governance. So that the people can, when you say, yes, the dividends of democracy, it's not just what you say by word of mouth, but that the people are living it, the people are experiencing it. And that is the best, protection against strife, against against protests, of this magnitude of what you are seeing in Kenya, you need to get the people engaged. Or there are too many youths that have nothing to do. And when you don't have anything to do, you have lesser stake in the preservation of the society. If instead you have grievances against a society that has not provided that you feel has not provided anything for you. So the job creation, economic equality or inequalities must be fought by every means so that the people can be empowered. When you empower the people, their stakes within the polity suddenly grows. It becomes in a matter of interest for them to protect that polity because the polity is providing, for the existence of their families. And so this is the way I think the politicians should begin, to think and look at things. And any other way, obviously, is going to end up in failure.
All right, Mr. Achike Chude, Global Affairs Analyst, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for shining light on issues here at home and across the African continent. And of course, we do continue to preach the message of peace in all of our engagements. Thank you so much.